Well, next up on stage, it is my great pleasure to inspire you because the next people that are coming out, I think we all admire for the work they've been doing, for the trends they've been building. So starting first, Christy Turlington Burns is the founder of Every Mother Counts, and she is a tireless advocate. We see her everywhere for maternal health issues. Most important to her, she's the mom of Grace and Finn. With her will be Ariel Pablos-Mendez, the Assistant Administrator for Global Health at USAID. He is the dad of Alan, Fernando, Ariel Jr., and Alejandra, so he's very busy. And Sheryl WuDunn, author of Half the Sky, business executive, and mom of Gregory, Jeffrey, and Carolyn. And I have to say a special excitement and thank you. Also joining us will be Randall Lane, the editor of Forbes. He is the dad of Sabrina and Chloe, and he is the brains behind the Forbes Philanthropy Summit. He has stepped in for us today because Miss Ann Curry had to go on assignment late last night, and so she will be live tweeting at you guys today and watching us from her plane, she said. But I really want to thank all of these wonderful individuals for joining us on stage.
Well, thank you, and I'm very honored to be here specifically, especially since I'm not Ann Curry. But I do share. I'm also mad at Matt Lauer because I blame him. He stole my trademark hairstyle here, so I think he owes me one. And like Elizabeth said, my hair's never been bigger either today, so it's a problem. I guess I want to direct the first question to the moms here. So Ariel, you and I get a pass on this. I mean, here we are, it's just such a great event, and with Mother's Day coming up on Sunday. What specifically about being a mother changes what you do, different from being a father or from not having children? What is it about specifically being a mom that changes what you do and how you do it?
Well, I guess in some ways this is a blessing and a curse, but we become a mom from the moment of conception, right? So we start thinking about it, even maybe before conception, in a way that I don't think dads do. I mean, I'm sure there might be some that dream that they're going to be a dad one day, but I think it's something that's more in our present mind than it is, perhaps. So we have more time to kind of make those connections. And then, from the moment that the child is born, and in my case, it sort of started why I do what I do, because I had a complication. But really, my whole life is then forever, daily and every moment connected to what they're doing, where they are, who's doing what, logistics, in a way that I think is slightly different than my husband, even though he's very, very engaged.
Sure.
I think that mothers get totally underappreciated in the world, both in a day world as well as in just the personal world. When I became a mom, I then all of a sudden realized that I had actually just entered management at the New York Times on the business side, and I was shocked to realize that, my goodness, all of the mom skills that I'm building are actually useful management skills. And how come no one ever told me about this? They never said anything. They never said, wow, the skills that you need to develop to be a really good mom are also the management skills. Whenever you go to these management training programs and talk about management, because it's always men who are giving those training programs, they never talk about how, these are transferable skills. So that was one really big insight. And the other thing I also have been stumbling upon recently, because my husband and I are writing another book. And one of the interesting things we've been finding is how important motherhood is, even more so than we actually thought around the world, but also here in the US. So one of the interesting pieces of research, and this is just a little tidbit so that I can whet your appetite for the next book. That's the end of the commercial, sorry. It's funny. So people think that when you have a son and it's a broken family, you need a father figure because a father figure is so important for that son growing up. So they've actually done some research to show what happens when they actually bring the father back into the home and try and build a cohesive unit so that son has a father figure. Well, it turns out that it's actually better for the father than it is for the son, because it turns out that the family cohesion keeps the father off the streets and out of jail, whereas, there wasn't that much impact on the son with the father or without the father. So I thought that was very interesting.
I find
I will end on that
that
note.
very depressing, actually. But interesting. Let's talk about timing a little. It's fun. Over the last 3 years, all three of you have had kind of an eventful 3 years. And that Sheryl, your book has, came out 3 years ago. Christy, you started your foundation 3 years ago. Ariel, almost 3 years ago, you started your new job. Are we talking about what you guys are working on? Is this a kind of a multi-decade kind of pursuit, or because you're all working towards similar goals, or is this something we can measure year to year based on these 3-year time increments that you've all experienced? Can you move the needle in a relatively short period of time?
Well, this is actually a very optimistic time for the health of women and girls and maternal health in particular, because historically for centuries there was not much attention in the sense that is required. And even recently, as someone who has been in global health for the last 20 years, the attention had not really focused on women in the way it has happened, particularly in the last 5 years. Measurement was an issue, and now we can see dramatic progress taking place because of the motivation, a lot of partners coming on board, a lot of innovation coming also into this space, resources, and things are changing. When you see a 50% decline in maternal mortality, is fantastic. And when you now document that even though you are now reaching the last mile, the rate of improvement is actually accelerating, is again a great moment. And we certainly look forward to ending preventable maternal deaths. And this generation can deliver that. We had to do it year after year, but it can be done in our generation.
Well, Sheryl, you've bookended this night, literally. That your book came out as a clarion call, and now you're working on this next book. So have you seen real progress, or is it kind of inching?
Oh, I think there has definitely been real progress, but we also are very realistic. I mean, this is a decades-long movement because, it's incremental. Here, look at the United States, where we certainly don't have the maternal mortality that, there is in the developing world, but, we still have our mountains to climb. But I would say that one of the things that really is stunning in how fast it has, spread is just word of mouth about these issues. Just, the awareness of these issues that just 3 or 4 years ago just didn't exist. And, so Christy's organization is just way out there in front. I mean, it's just, really being answering a sort of a desire for solutions. And so I think that building awareness really has helped a lot. And so we think that using social media, maybe that's also helped, nudge the movement along and spread it faster than it otherwise would have. We've also done a game on Facebook. Half the Sky, has a game on Facebook, which is another platform. I think that because of social media, you can actually reach many more people than in the past. And so that's partly why I think, there's great awareness.
Christy, have you found that? You've gone from a nascent startup, and now you're 3 years in. I mean, how have you found kind of, social media in terms of how you've been able to grow your programs? And maybe tell us a little bit about your programs.
Sure. Well, I became a mom almost 10 years ago, and when I first came into this area of looking at maternal mortality globally, the numbers were staggering. There were 500,000+ women that were dying every year from preventable causes largely. And really, when you look at what's happened and how the numbers have come down so significantly over the last 3 years, it's not to say that that happened over 3 years. It was, decades before that time. But there is momentum, and I think it really is a culmination of so many people working together on the same issue. And I still feel that there's a window for maternal health, and it's something that we still have to really push for, because it can close, and it's as simple as some of the solutions are. It's kind of complicated too. One of the things we've tried to do as an organization is try to include more people. This is a conversation that's been happening for decades at a very high level, or a grassroots level in countries that are far away from the US. And I think what's happening now is more people, more everyday citizens are engaging on these issues. They're interested because naturally, who are the better people to solve this problem than moms ourselves? So there's a power in sort of including people, and Every Mother Counts really sort of seeks to engage new audiences and give them meaningful ways to contribute.
Yeah, I'm a journalist, of course, so I'm always looking for scoop. Now, I know you guys are going to announce something tomorrow. Maybe you can give us a preview, and we can make a little news here.
Sure.
About what you might be saying tomorrow, so we know today.
Sure. Well, we're an advocacy organization primarily, but we have started to give a few grants. In the last year, it's been exciting because we are supporting the training of skilled birth attendants in Haiti, and we're also providing transportation vouchers for moms in Western Uganda. But the new announcement is that one of the individuals who's a sort of shining star in No Woman, No Cry, the film that I made, Jenny Joseph, who's a nurse midwife in Central Florida, we are giving her a grant, which will help to supplement the difference between what Medicaid takes care of so that more women have access to prenatal care. Because in the US, it's particularly important that women who still fall through the cracks, even with a safety net, that they have access to prenatal care so we can see signs before they occur, and that's the best way we can do it. So we're going to be supporting an amazing individual in Florida.
So Every Mother Counts coming to America. Tweet it out, folks.
Actually, can I add something?
Please.
USAID has been really, really gracious as well with us. So they've actually partnered with the Half the Sky team to create mobile games around, in the international arena. So mobile games to basically reach, families in Kenya, in India, to really educate them about, what you have to do to boost maternal health. So one of the pilots that they did was a mobile game that they released in India called 9 Days. 1 day for 1 month of pregnancy, and they each day was telling the family what the mother should be expecting and what she should do in that month of pregnancy.
Well, mobile games are so smart, of course, because in so much of the world, you have people who have a mobile device, but they have no access to the internet any other way, no computer. So that's just so smart. Ariel, we're talking about maternal health. Christy's moving now into the U.S., but what explains to this day the crazy disparity? I mean, we're still talking between U.S. and Afghanistan. What, a factor of 100 in terms of the risk of death for childbirth? I mean, why do we still have such? Tell us from a physician's point of view, why this even still exists?
Well, the causes of death can be explained in 3 ways. First, there's fertility. High fertility and early and frequent pregnancies leads to maternal death. Second, there's comorbidity. That is, in Africa in particular, people have, during pregnancy, are more likely to get malaria, HIV, and so on. And third, of course, is the lack of assistance during delivery itself. And we are trying to tackle all of those. And even in Afghanistan, in the last 10 years, there's been 70% decline in maternal mortality, which is incredible. And through all the war, through all the news, our interventions are helping. And this is because it's not only the public health interventions of which I'm directly responsible, but it's also education, which is improving, economic empowerment, which is happening around the world, and a lot of innovation. We just heard about some of those, and there are more using cell phones in particular to reach and empower women. And in USAID, there's been really a big push on innovation recently, and my colleague Maura O'Neill has been really the spark plug of a lot of those ideas. I want to acknowledge that.
I mean, Sheryl, I've seen you speak about how societal cruelty towards women and girls kind of affects obviously their psyche. Does it affect how they raise children and how they act as mothers?
Oh, of course. I think that first of all, I want to preface this by saying that over the centuries, we have become a much less violent culture, and the attitudes towards women have improved dramatically. Just think of what it was like living, several hundred years ago as a woman. Horrible. But it is true that women themselves also imbibe the attitudes towards women. And what we do find is that in a lot of these developing countries, that sometimes the perpetrators of the worst evil, the beatings, the torture to other girls, young girls, are done by women. So it isn't just men versus women. We need a social movement to bring about this change, because it's not women versus men. It is basically just attitudes towards women that society kind of has embraced for all these years in some of these places, and that's what needs to change.
Yeah, Ariel, I guess if you have access to all the latest statistics, you see all the innovations going on. If you were helping Sheryl with her book, what trend do you see right now that we should all be watching as we go forward?
I think cell phones is one of the most important tools to empower women. Information and knowledge is important. I think you were with Secretary Clinton 2 years ago, just before I joined USAID, in the launch of Mama, one of those applications. And I've seen it in action in Bangladesh. We're going to have a video here later on illustrating how powerful that tool is, because basic, simple information is so important at the right time, before pregnancy, during pregnancy, and in the first few months of the baby's life. So that I think cell phones is going to be very important. Another important thing I think is communications. I believe awareness is making a big difference in the following way. For centuries, people expected women to die. People expected children to die. That is changing. To the extent the normative set point changes, a lot of other forces converge to make sure that nobody dies. And that is happening in more and more countries. It's an optimistic outlook, but I think in the next 10 to 20 years will contribute to ending preventable child and maternal deaths in the world.
Well, it also, of course, helps with then the issue of overpopulation that you see what the Gates Foundation's been doing, and that they figured out that if you know that your children have a very good chance of survival, you don't need to have 10 children. And so, I think the issue is even bigger, and the opportunity is even bigger. Well, in fairness, then I'm going to let Sheryl help you out. And that, the USAID, if you poll Americans and they always say, well, if you're going to cut the budget, what are you going to cut? They always say foreign aid, even though it's a teeny sliver of the budget. Sheryl, what can we do for Ariel to change the perception and or change the reality of what USAID
First of all, it's less than 1%. Even less, it's a tiny percent of 1% in terms of what USAID, you know the exact figures. I don't know the precise figures, but it's much smaller. In fact, we're not even, in terms of dollar amounts, it might be quite significant, but in terms of percentage-wise of GDP, the countries, I think Norway is bigger than we are. So we aren't really devoting that much. But it's also really important, if the U.S. is going to be a very strong voice in the world, if it wants to use the bully pulpit, it really does have to put money behind what it says. And so I think that you need to have this kind of aid that paves the way, that shows that the U.S. is serious about what it says when it takes these moral standings, because otherwise, we are basically being hypocritical. And so I think it's extremely important. It helps in foreign policy much more than you can imagine.
Christy, what have you experienced as you're a veteran traveler. I think your parents worked for Pan Am, right? So you've been traveling your whole life, and in your new role, and you're doing almost all your work abroad. What is the perception of an American coming and helping? What have you experienced?
I get the sense at the village level, or in any community that I travel to, whether it's the U.S. or outside of the U.S., when people they care and they are concerned and they want to hear and listen to women where they are, there is a gratitude. So that I see across the board, but just in terms of what Sheryl was just answering to in terms of the U.S. and our leadership globally, a few months ago when the Violence Against Women Act was passed, thankfully, after way too much time, but what that sets as a precedent and as a sign to the rest of the world is that, violence against women happens everywhere, as we've seen in our media in the last few months especially, and just yesterday or the day before. These are issues that touch all of us everywhere, and it's a shame to have those examples on a daily basis, but honestly, for us as a country to stand up and say, this is not acceptable to us either, it sets a really important tone globally, and it's the responsible thing to do, it's the smart thing to do.
I think we have time for maybe one more question. I want to, in honor of Mother's Day, I want to ask everyone a question. What did your mother teach you that you have applied to the good works that you're doing? Maybe we'll go in this order.
Chinese American household, education was really important. So boy, it was just education. And it's funny because, of course, I always thought education was really important, but I hadn't really applied it to the rest of the world. And so it's very funny that now in the development work that you Ariel, do so well, it is just so critical. It's almost like the one, if you had to say, what is the most important thing in terms of turning around societies, I do think that education is it. And education takes many forms. It's not just, just elementary school, middle school and high school and college. It's also education about issues in general, about, life skills and stuff like that. So it's a very broad category, but I think that that's one thing that, it's interesting how, it's just such an important facet of human existence.
I will add to education, and being, of course, fundamental, respect. I think my mother was really endorse respect in the family, in the community, respect for life, respect for women, respect for each other. I think respect is very important in what we do, and I think that is indeed one of the driving forces now in ensuring women are more empowered and increasingly equal around the world.
My mom is actually here today, but I would say that
Where is she? Where is she?
Where are you, Mom?
Hi, Mom.
She's here somewhere. Okay.
That's wonderful.
But I feel like she's taught me the most by actions, and it would include education. There were times in my career where I thought the last thing I wanted to do was go back to high school and finish, even though that was the easiest point in my life. And I've gone back twice since. And as well, she taught me through travel and her love of seeing the world and knowing the world. I think that was remarkable. And then also dedicating herself to service. She always was engaged in our community, engaged in social issues, from well before they were a popular thing to do in the area where I grew up. So I'm very grateful. Thank you, Mom.
Thanks, Mom.
Thank you, Mom.
Thank you, Mom. Thanks to all Mom. My mom also was well-traveled. She's been to over 100 countries, so I do think that's something that opened my eyes as well. I will say to Christy's mom here, it's I believe, the famous saying, of course, if women ruled the world, there'd be no wars. I really think that should be modified to, if mothers ruled the world, there'd be no wars. So, I think this is such an important topic. It's such an important event. I want to thank all of you for coming out today and supporting this, everybody in the audience, and Christy's mom, too. So, happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's
Thank
Day.
you.
Happy Mother's Day.